Hello, everyone. This is Chris P. from Noisewire, and today I'm chatting with Pittsburgh's own Jim Semonik, leader of the band Red Lokust and owner of Distortion Productions. How are you doing today, Jim?
I am excellent. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I do want to apologize. I'm still a little bit under the weather. Was just in Seattle for Mechanismus, and I brought back this horrible bug
Oh no.
uh, with me. And yeah, so if I sound a little nasally, that's why.
No, you're all good. So let's get started. How did you get introduced into what we call industrial music? Where did you find it? Was it something you found as a kid, or how did that work out?
Not as well as a kid. Maybe like not including Nine Inch Nails and Ministry. I don't include those two because I was listening to them in high school. I was in I think 10th grade when the Wish video came out for on Broken Nine Inch Nails, and it was like 1992. And so I was a sophomore in high school, and I was already into like Alice in Chains and Nirvana and Soundgarden and all that Seattle stuff. And Nine Inch Nails brought sort of a different kind of aesthetic that I was not used to seeing. And then, Psalm 69 from Ministry came out that year. And my friend Don, who I grew up with and went to high school with, he got me into a lot of that stuff. Like I found Nine Inch Nails on my own, but had only heard Broken. I hadn't heard Pretty Hate Machine, so he played that for me. But it wasn't until the Crow soundtrack came out. I was about to graduate high school. This was in '94, so that came out in April. So I remember picking up the soundtrack because it had a bunch of artists on it that I liked at the time, like Jesus and Mary Chain, Helmet, uh, Stone Temple Pilots, Rage Against the Machine. But there were these other bands on there, and one that really stood out to me was Machines of Loving Grace. Remember them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and I heard their song on their Golgotha Tenement Blues, and I was like, this track is just rad. And My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult,
yeah, yeah.
that track on there was amazing too. So I go into school the next day, and I remember being in homeroom, and I was talking to my buddy Jeff, uh, and he was into bands like Meat Beat Manifesto and all this like weird electronic stuff that I never heard before. And I told him I picked up the Crow soundtrack. I was like, I really like this band, Machines of Loving Grace, on there. He was like, oh, I have their cassette Concentration. I'll let you borrow it. Well, he never
Nice.
brought it in. He never brought it in for me to borrow. And it was like 2 weeks before graduation. My buddy Don and I were just sitting around here in Ambridge, PA, and small town outside of Pittsburgh, about 45 minutes north. And we had a city paper, and we were like, I really want to see some music tonight. Let's see what's up in Pittsburgh tonight, the Metropole, which was the club that all the industrial bands played at. Well, everybody played there. I mean, I'm not going to limit it to industrial. We look, and that night, it was May 19th. I still have the ticket stub to this. What KMFDM was playing with Sister Machine Gun and Chemlang. Now, I had not heard of the other two, but I saw a Drug Against War video on Headbangers Ball, and I was like, I heard of KMFDM, never heard of the other two guys. So why don't we go check that out? So we went. Okay, we got there. It was still light outside, but Sister Machine Gun had already gone on. Like they went
Ooh,
on early, which sucked because I went on to become a huge fan of them. Saw them live a bunch of times after that, but I remember, we were in the pit area, and the lights go down. Out comes this dude with this long black lab coat, goggles on his head, jet black hair. He just comes out, and it's like real noisy. There's guitarists on stage, and my buddy looks at the stage, and he sees all this electronic gear, like these digital drum pads, keyboards, like all this crazy shit that we weren't used to seeing at a live show before. It was usually just guitar, bass, drums, singer, right? So he looks at it, he's like, wow, look at all that shit. I hope can I curse? Am
yeah,
I allowed
yeah,
to curse? All
yeah,
right.
yeah. It's the internet. You
Um,
can do whatever you want.
uh, so out comes this figure, and he just like stood there, looked down at the crowd, and then the band just like went right into, I think it was Suicide Jag. The crowd went absolutely bananas. And the dude had a stage presence that I never saw before in a live artist. He, to this day, Jared from ChemLab has set the bar for me on what a live performer should be. So, as far as like playing live, it boils down to like two people. And it was because I saw him first. It was Jared, and I think Eric from Hosico, gives an amazing performance too. So it's like those two people combined is like I take a lot from them for stage. And after I saw ChemLab play, it's like KMFDM didn't even phase me that night. And this was the Angst Fest tour.
Yeah.
And there were 4 guitarists on stage. It was so loud. And because that's like the real guitar heavy album. And then I walked out of there and just blown away by what I had seen. And I'm like, wow, everything I ever heard sucks compared to that. And so I just wanted more of it. I found Industrial Nation magazine. My friend Jeff let me borrow that Machines of Loving Grace cassette. And it was like the day before graduation. He was like, you could just keep it.
Nice.
So, and I loved it. I fell in love with that album. And it just went from there. And from there, I just wanted to find more and more bands. I found Reconstriction Records, 21st Circuitry, Fifth Column, Cop International, Metropolis. And like, I wouldn't buy when I'm and I do not still have the cassette. By the way, the Machines of Loving Grace, I don't have it anymore. I have it on CD though.
Nice.
But I don't know. It's just I would shop by label going into the record store. I'd be like, well, this is on such and such. I'll pick it up.
I remember doing that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if it was on a label that I liked, and I would pick it up regardless of who it was. Especially if it was used. Oh my God! You tried to get back in those days, like mid '90s. You're scouring the used bins for anything because you were so rabid about new music back then. And like I still kind of try to carry that into today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you make the transition into being a musician? Like, at what point did you say, okay, this is something I want to try to do. This is something I want to like pursue creating?
It wasn't for a while after I got into the music. I was always fascinated by, music and wanting to be in a band and stuff, but I never thought I had the talent or what it took to be like a singer-songwriter or anything. So I never really attempted it until my friend Don and I like created this like weird experimental thing that we played one show. It was the band was called Soil Creep, and it was like this hodgepodge of drum barrels and synthesizers and I just remember drumming. Like I didn't sing. I just remember drumming on this oil barrel and getting these horrible blisters on my hands from that show. And it was the first show I ever played as what you might call a musician, but it really wasn't that. And years later after that, I met the guys in Mindless Faith when I was in college, Jason and Chris, and I met them at a Halloween party in State College, PA, when I was going to school up there, and became good friends with them. And then they moved down here to Pittsburgh, and they asked me to be in the band as like their lighting guy. And I was like, well, what does that entail? They were like, well, you have a boom mic, so you got to know all of our songs to do backing vocals. So that was really my first experience being in a band. I played a few shows with them, but then they were going on tour, and I was like, I can't go on tour. I have a job, I can't just take off and go, on a tour. So they had to replace me. And I'm still friends with Jason and of course Mine K Drick from that band, and stay in touch with them regularly. But it wasn't until maybe 2000, which was the year later, I met these guys from Pitt University who did, the one guy, Dave, he did this really kick-ass, like almost like drum and bass style, but fused with industrial EBM stuff. And it was really unusual. And I loved it. I was like, I'd love to put some vocals to this. And my other friend, Matt, was like, we should do a dual vocal thing because nobody does that outside of maybe Front 242. They had two vocalists on stage. And so I'm like, yeah, it's a cool idea. I sort of had a loud, screamy, higher end, voice, and he was like the more Hosico, lower end, raspy type vocal, and so we played off of each other really well. We did one album. We released it on DSBP Records back then, and then they kind of met girls and lost interest and didn't want to do it anymore. And I started getting us all these like opening gigs. We had opening gigs for like Funkerbone, Thrill Kill Cult,
wow.
Pigface, and oh my God, Martin Atkins and Chris Conley. We had a lot of really great opening, gigs for like heroes, guys that I really loved, back then, still love today. And then they were just like, we don't want to do it anymore. I was like, well, do you mind if I keep the name and, find other people? Because I had two other guys that were willing to jump right in.
Yeah.
And Matt had a problem with that. And he was like, well, I don't want you to call it forced anymore because I'm not in it. And I'm like, well, okay, I didn't take that well. I was like, you guys are the ones that are quitting, so I didn't particularly take it that well. And I could have been more, I could have handled the situation better, in hindsight 25 years ago. But, so the band became Reinforced, a little play on words.
Yeah.
But, and we signed to, we released another album on DSBP, and then signed to WT2, released an album over there and a remix album. And then around 2016, we were playing with KMFDM and Inertia at Mr. Smalls when I met Lee from Red Lokust. He was in a band called Aslan Faction back in 2003, 2002.
Yeah, I remember them really well.
That whole Noitech kind of scene.
Yeah.
And so I had met him one other time. He came to my FGF C820 show that I did here in Pittsburgh, and introduced himself then. And so, he's just saying, hey, that was a really good set, man. And we were just talking. He's like, so I have, a bunch of stuff that I need a vocalist for, and I think you'd be perfect. And I'm like, really? And I was like, well, goddamn, you're an Aslan Faction, dude. I'd love to work with you. And so I was going to Vegas the next day. And I remember being in the airport and opening up my laptop and checking my email, and there were 6 songs already in there to work on. I said to my girlfriend, I was like, holy shit, he sent me 6 songs already to work on. So I guess I'll be busy when I get back. And that, those turned into songs on our first album. We've been working well since, yeah. So that's the whole evolution of that story.
So when did you get the idea I should start a label then? Because that's a lot of work. And was it like out of necessity where you're like, I want to start a label for myself, or was it just some sort of burning desire?
I will fully admit, I was not ready at the time. The label started, I was not prepared. Chase Dudley, who was in the band Box Warning, he doesn't do the project anymore, but he's still involved with Electronic Saviors. He's the one I enlisted when I started the Saviors project for help on like the technology end of things. And he agreed to help me out. But around the time we were doing the second one, he basically said, hey, I finished my album, my Boxed Warning album. I want to release it on a label. I'm like, okay, I can get you contact information for like, Cop or Metropolis or Negative Gain, or, I threw him a bunch of, he was like, no, I want to do this on your label. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't have a label. And he was like, well, what if we created one I was like, what, just under Distortion? I'm like, you mean like my concert promotion company? And because I had been doing shows under that moniker since 2000,
Oh, okay.
uh, as Distortion Productions. So the name existed way back then. And my second show flyer that I ever did, which was Iconic Coil in 2001, it says Distortion Productions on it. And so I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I kind of felt like I don't know what that entails. Like, and he was like, well, I'll help you. And so I had known some people that could hook us up with distribution. So through Nail Distribution in Portland, and MVD Music Video or Music Video Entertainment, yeah, and MVD Entertainment Group they're called. They're who we're distributed through now. They do like Metropolis and Cop and like all the North American labels.
All right, sorry about that, Jim.
Oh no, it's perfect.
So, you were talking about Distortion Productions, and I think you were talking about you would create the label, and then
Oh yeah. I didn't want to.
right,
I didn't want to. Chase. I always joke around with Chase now. I'm like, you made me do this. You're not even with the label anymore, man. What the fuck? So, no, it was sort of a thing where I had people in place that I knew that could hook us up with distribution. I had a network to where, I mean, nobody knew who Boxed Warning was outside of him being an Electronic Saviors co-creator. Um, he the Boxed Warning stuff is sort of like this abstract techno IDM stuff, and really like there's no vocals in it, other than like the occasional, robotic voice and sample, but it's pretty instrumental. And we released 2 records by him, but he really wanted to do this. And I'm like, well, the premium edition of Electronic Saviors 2, if you got the premium back then, came with an extra 2 discs, and that was Distortion 001.
ah,
And so the Boxed Warning album is Distortion 002. So that is essentially how things started, and things kind of got real big real fast, because before we were even at number 10, we had already put out 2 Stoneburner releases. Steven messaged me one night and he was like, how serious are you about this label thing? And I'm like, and this is before Stoneburner was even really public. And I'm like, as serious as I can be with a day job, and I just want to see where it goes, to see what I can do, and maybe one day I can be doing stuff like giving advances for tours, and loaning bands money so they can get their stuff made, or pressing CDs for bands, and or even vinyl, but back then vinyl was just starting to come back.
yeah,
It's 2012. So he was like, well, I'd like to release an album with you, just to see, and I'm like, I'll do my best. I'd known Steven for a number of years before that from Ego Likeness, and we signed a local Pittsburgh band called Shut Down. Now, Shut Down, we released this one record. They had a CD release party. They were gaining a lot of momentum here in Pittsburgh. They were playing a decent amount of shows. The problem is that there was a interband issue, and they ended up breaking up right after their CD release party.
ooh,
And I'm like, this record label thing, I don't think it's gonna work out. So I was just, kind of just like, man, do I really want to do this? And I mean, they were all apologetic. They understood, and the label didn't lose any money or anything over it. They took full responsibility for the situation, and unfortunately, they were a great band. I did guest vocals on that record and on a song, and I thought they had a lot of potential, but sometimes things just don't work out, and I get that. And not long after that, Stacy from the Spider Lilies contacted me and wanted to do an EP with us. It had remixes by Aesthetic Perfection and was produced by Seb Komar. And I was like, okay, this has some names on it. This is cool. And Seb produced it. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of gun shy about EPs. This was only like 3 new songs and a ton of remixes of those 3 songs. I'm like, if I release this, you got to give me an album. And they were like, that's fair. So I released that. I'm still waiting on that album. It's 2025. I'll have you know. I joke with Stacey all the time. I'm like, when am I getting that album? But she's still working on it. We've been releasing songs from Spider Lilies on the ES comps. But then I woke up one morning to a voice message from N. Ash from Slick Idiot, KMFDM, Pigface, all those bands. Not expecting it at all. I just wake up, I roll over in the morning, I grab my phone, I'm like, somebody called me in the middle of the night, and it was Anesh. Leaves a message. Hey, Jim, this is Anesh in the flesh, KMFDM, Slick Idiot. Have a new album. It was weird, right? I'm like, wow, how'd this dude get my phone number? And we ended up releasing the Spank album, and then Dope Stars Inc. right after that. And then Klaus Larson, a project from him. So I was dealing with way too much too fast, and I kind of didn't know what the hell I was doing at the time. And I'm like, I need to maybe dial this back and, sign some smaller artists that are more, manageable to deal with. Because I even tell Klaus, now, I was like, dude, when we signed you with Amity Airpark, I had no idea what I was doing. And you know what the weird thing is we released that record on CD, the Uncaged record, on CD. And we pressed 300 of them. And the first pressing almost sold out instantly. But then right as we released that, our distribution in Portland went bankrupt.
Oh.
Nail distribution went belly up, and none of the labels were getting paid. And I was freaking out. So I called, people at WT2 Records, and I was like, what is going on? I was like, what's happening with Nail? And he was like, we're transferring all of your stuff over to MVD immediately so that you're not affected by this.
Oh, nice.
Some of the bands, man, they really, really got screwed bad in that. Like, they lost a ton of inventory. They lost all their digital sales for like 6 months, which is thousands of dollars, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was brutal. I was just like, oh my God. I was like, I can't believe this kind of stuff still happens. Because I remember in the late 90s when IFA went out of business in Europe, and that was like a big thing. Like, I remember a lot of labels over there lost a lot of money, put some European labels out of business. And I'm like, this is like almost akin to that. Like, it was a shot that like a lot of labels like had to take. And luckily we were relatively unaffected by it, which we kind of lucked out. But at the same time, I got to release one of my favorite synth pop records, the Tenek record. Those guys, Jeff and Pete, I still work with those guys today, even though Tenek's not a thing anymore. But, it just kind of evolved from there. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but essentially, I didn't want to do this at first. I was like, no, I'm not ready for this. And Chase was like, come on, let's do it. I'm like, oh. It didn't take a whole lot of arm twisting, but at the same time, it was,
Now that you're in it, though, are you like, do you feel like you've hit a stride with it? Like, do you feel comfortable with how you manage the business and stuff like that?
yeah, the last couple years especially have been a huge step forward. Um, I would say the last 3 years. And I'm noticing now, like with the release of Electronic Saviors 7, we've never had an Electronic Saviors have this much of an impact this fast.
Really?
Yeah, like Volume Sevens of nothing ever do as well as the first. I mean, subsequent volumes, always get less and less, but we did take that 5 years off. And I think, there wasn't supposed to be a volume seven, and I'll go into that later on. But um, now that we're back and doing that again, like the response has been tremendous. Like Dark Force Fest, unbelievable response. Like I was overwhelmed by the response there, and at the panel, man, that was you can watch that. I think there's footage of that panel. It got emotional, man. Like
Yeah.
when I talk about this stuff, I kind of, you know, it, and it might happen on this interview. Like it comes out of me. Like I think about like all the things that I was going through back then and relate it to where I am now, and it's just like it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with emotionally, I think. And so, yeah, I would say a huge amount of growth in the last couple of years, not just professionally, but and working with bands that I've always wanted to work with in my life, but on a personal level too. I mean, we all got to continue to grow as human beings, and I think the best way to do that is to really be in touch with what you love and about being alive. And those things tend to be music related, whether it's my job or the label or Electronic Saviors or the band or the occasional DJing spot. But I can't do that stuff all the time, otherwise I'd lose my mind.
Yeah.
It does it encompasses about 80% of my time, 80 to 90. The other 10%, I have a dog that if I ignore, she gets mad at me. In fact, she's down there right now, probably like, why does he have his door closed? And so my family, my mom and my brother and my girlfriend and my buddies, who I'm a huge and this is public knowledge, I'm a huge comic book and toy nerd. So I that's what I do when I'm not trying to think about music. When I've completely had it with artists for the day, and I'm like, oh, if I get another email, I'm ready to throw this laptop. I was like, I need to go out and look for comics and toys to get my mind off of it. But that's what I do in my spare time.
So speaking of artists you've always wanted to work with, you had announced recently that you're going to re-release Transmissions from Evil
Yeah, baby.
from Acumen Nation, their 1994 release. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about and like what that means to you?
This is a really funny story. First of all, it means the world to me that we're getting this. And I saw Jason up at Mechanismus, and I lost my cool with him because it was after both of us had played. He had just done his AccuCrack set, or no. It was the day 16 Volt played, but he was playing guitar for 16 Volt, or maybe no, it was he was playing bass, I think. But um, I, I had a few drinks, and I just went up to him at the end, and I was talking about the track he gave us for Savior 7, and I kind of lost it, man. I was just like, I can't believe you did that for me. And it just I got sad, like sad but happy, and
Yeah.
like I hugged him and I was just like, just thank you, man. I was like, and he was like, no, he was like, I owe you one. And he was like, because after Jamie passed away, I mean, that well was dry, and he had like really nothing in the tank. And if you hear that track, man, it's like we're right back there. We're right back in like peak Acumen Nation,
Yeah.
awesome just incredible song. I always thought Jason and Eric Powell from 16 Volt were two of the best songwriters out there. Like I was always in awe of their songwriting. You know, there was this one question I was asked in an interview once about what's a song you wish you had written. There's a song by Acumen Nation on More Human Heart called Dream Heart Crush. And lyrically, that song is everything I love about music wrapped up into one tune. And just heartbreaking, but super emotional, you know. And the whole story behind the vinyl, like I'd known Jason for over 20 years, ever since doing shows for him here. And Eric, I haven't known for as long. I've known Eric since the year I was diagnosed with cancer, and but had always been a fan, like a tremendous fan. I'd seen them live a few times. Actually, no, I first time I met Eric to where we became first name basis people was on the Attack tour of KMFDM in 2002. He did an in-store at my work, and that's when I became friends. But that was pre-internet, you know. Well, internet was just starting to take off then, I think, and you know most people were emailing, so we would email back and forth. But the story behind the vinyl starts with the two of those guys, because I consider them both dear friends now. And around, it was last year, sometime, I can't remember the context of how it came up, but I said to Eric, I'm like, dude, you should really like think about releasing your 90s records on vinyl. I was like, you ever think about that? And he was like, that's an amazing idea, man. And I'm like, but you're with Metropolis, right? and he was like, yeah. I was like, you're doing your next record with them? I'm like, I love Metropolis Records. Like I love them. And this shirt is older than most people, and in our scene. So I told my friend Cassie, I was like, I have shirts that are older than you, and I I wouldn't have felt right about it, um, being like not talking to them first and being like, I'm releasing the 16 volt back catalog on vinyl, you know, without talking to them first. I'm like, Eric, I'm like, you should go to them and ask them to see if they will do it. And if they say no, you know, I'll do it. And essentially, he went over to Gail and Nina, and they're, you know, they just put out Wisdom. It just came out, and I can't wait to get my copy. It's on order. They had them up in Seattle, but I didn't get one there because I knew I could get it through work. So uh, my copies are coming later this week. So I'm like, okay, so Metropolis gets the 16 volt vinyl. I'm like, what you can do for me is, I know Jason and you know Jason, but Jason won't won't hear it coming from me. I was like, why don't you whisper in his ear, hey, you should let Semonik do your 90s records on vinyl. You know, and I had FJ from Trade Secrets, who's also a, you know, Crack Nation friend of Jason's, you know, say the same thing. You know, hey, you should do uh, Acumen with Distortion, and so Jason was really into the idea, and I absolutely love that, telling that story, because now I get to rib Jim at Metropolis about it. I was like, hey, that 16 volt vinyl, my idea. Then I have to tell the whole story. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely adore the Metropolis people, and they've been with me through, you know, everything. Like if it weren't for Dave Hackman, man, very good chance I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Really?
There's a very, if he didn't call me that afternoon in July of 2009, very good chance I wouldn't be sitting here talking. I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't, you know, the trajectory of my life would be completely different
Yeah.
if I was even still alive. Totally different. And it's amazing. I told Gail that story, his wife. I was like, if your husband didn't call me that day, none of this would have happened if I wouldn't have picked up that phone. And it's amazing what one event could do. Like a lot of people have events like that in their life where one singular thing sets them on a completely different path than where they were going, and that's mine. So the Acumen vinyl, it comes out in September. We started pre-orders for it, and it's already off to the races. Though I do want to tell people, if you're thinking about getting this, pre-order it, because it's a huge financial risk for the label. It's our first double LP. Those are very expensive, and I haven't even seen the invoice yet, but I'm dreading it. Um, it's going to be two red colored translucent vinyl, gatefold cover. It's one of my favorite albums ever, and I mean, it's really something else. Like that I get to do this, and I just consider myself extremely lucky.
So, when you brought up the topic of producing these records, I think a lot of younger artists probably have no experience with manufacturing right now. At least I could imagine there are artists out there now that have released everything digitally and they have no concept of how you would even get a record made. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is like? Is there someone that you have like a go-to manufacturer for that kind of stuff? And
Yes.
do you need to be like at your level where you're ordering large distribution levels, or can you get that done as like an independent artist?
Um, well, I work with a local place called Hellbender Vinyl, and they're in Lawrenceville.
Okay.
So them being there is a huge boon for the label. Like I love them. Like Pam and Mike and Jeff over there, like they're tremendous people, and they're always super friendly, super helpful. If one thing goes wrong, they're always on top of it. Rarely things go wrong too, and I can just go over there and pick them up. It saves shipping. And uh, it's not complicated at all. Basically, I tell them what I want. They send me an invoice. I tell them how many copies I want. I get test pressings. I bring them home. I listen to them. I sign off on it, and I'm like, give them the thumbs up, and then it's off to pressing those. I mean, it is expensive. I'm not going to, sugarcoat anybody who wants to do a vinyl release. Like we just got our inertias yesterday. Or not yesterday. On Friday, I picked up the first box. I've had boxes. I have to bring them home one at a time because they're so heavy. But yeah, vinyl is heavy, and I got to ship one of them things to the UK.
Mm.
That's not going to be cheap. But yeah, it's I would go. I tell people I was like, go to Hellbender, man. They're awesome. Um, they'll work with you on whatever you want to do. If you're a small artist, um, I did a 7-inch for the band Everything Goes Cold, and it's like a light blue, and we put them in these clear plastic. They're not Mylar, but they have a flap on them, and you can put the 7-inch in there, and it looks really attractive, like on the merch table, and just like with a hype sticker on it. And the guys at Hellbender liked it so much, they were like, "What your idea is with this? You're just putting the record in a clear vinyl with a hype sticker on it. That's a great marketing idea." And they were like, we want to sort of borrow that and use that as a template for an a product in our system. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. And they were like, we'll call it the Jimmers. And I was like, that's hilarious. I was like, yes, do that. And whenever someone wants some that, yeah, give me 100 Jimmerses. And that way it helps an artist that might not have a lot of money to get like artwork printed. It saves on that
Yeah.
all you have to do is all the details are on the label that you can see right through the bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are all right there for you. So that's a little hack that I think some bands could use if they want to do 7 inches. It's or 12 inches. I mean, there's clear 12-inch bags like that too with the flaps. Um, I've seen them on record store day releases, so I know they exist. But yeah, Hellbender Vinyl. That's who we use. Before that, we dealt with a plant out west called Rainbow, but I think they're gone now. Our NS 7-inch and our MTR Park 12-inch EP, we got through them, and I don't think they're in existence anymore. And we did our Respect the Prime vinyl through this place in Vancouver called Standard Line. And everything else that we've done has been through Hellbender.
Nice, keeping it local in Pittsburgh. I like
Got
that.
to. Just and it's not only because it's convenient; it's because they're awesome people. And if they weren't, like Mike came to the store. I work at Ides, by the way, downtown,
Okay.
and record store, comic store. It's like all that stuff in one. And Mike came came to the store and talked to me for like an hour just about the business and like how they started and stuff like that. And like I connected with the guy instantly, and I'm like, man, these guys are really on top of things. They're brilliant, and so when I connect with someone like that, it turns into a lifelong thing usually. So I can only hope that I'll just continue to work with them.
Yeah, so you had mentioned everything goes cold. I know you've been doing a lot of work with Interface. What do you look for in a band when you decide that you want to give them an opportunity to work with the label? Is there like a certain criteria that you're looking for, or is it just it just happens that way?
I have I was asked this up in Seattle, and I tell people that I have a very big "don't be a dick" policy. Um, that entails like not being a dick. You just treat people with respect. Um, I don't want to get too political, but yes, sometimes there are people that if you're anti this or anti that, if it's going to hurt somebody, especially if it's going to hurt someone else on my label that's an artist, like go don't Distortion's not the label for you. Um, I I will not tolerate any kind of hate or racism, sexism, homophobia. I don't want to give anyone a platform for hatred, and to where it can be used against anybody that I care about. And I care about all my artists because at the end of the day, they're trusting me with their music, and maybe it doesn't always pan out the way they want it to, or it's not what they expected. But, I always try to be as fair as possible and always be upfront. I try to run the most honest business I can. In the record business, that's, a challenge because you're dealing with so many people, and I've witnessed so much other crap in not really in our scene as much as you hear from label execs over the years. I've worked in a record store for a long time, so I've heard a ton of stories from distribution people and about this band, about that band, and there is a really ugly side to the business, and I'm doing my best to subscribe to anything that can be construed as hateful or so if you're a band that has a certain political view that encompasses any of that, Distortion's not for you.
Yeah.
Come here because you want to express yourself as an artist, not spread hate. Um, that's number one. Like kind of, and I my views on that align a lot with some of the other bigger labels in the scene. Like we've talked about this, and being a decent human being should be fundamental. Um, Number two, I have to really be into your stuff, or if I'm not familiar with it, I have to be really familiar with someone who worked on it. If you like, I don't like. I can tell you that I've not signed a whole lot of bands that have just sent me demos in the mail. Uh, it's happened a couple times, but for the most part, I signed the Russian White and Solemn Shapes after seeing them live. I walked right up on stage after a performance, Solemn Shapes, and I was like, "So you guys are working on a new album?" And they were like, "Yeah." I was like, "Do you want to release it with me?" Melanie looked at me and she was like, "Shut up." I'm like, "I'm serious." And, now they're on the label, so if you blow me away live, I'm probably gonna approach you. If I know you're not already with another label that that I'm familiar with, or, if you're definitely unsigned and you're putting on that kind of a show and I've not heard of you before and you blow me away in a second, in a New York minute, I'm like on you after the show at the merch table. I'm like, let's do something, so I, other than that, like Interface, I've known those guys since long before I had a label. I toured with them when I was in Reinforced. So, um, uh, some of the bands on the label I have previous history with from even before I had a label. So, I mean, sometimes it works out that way. If it's someone I've known and trusted for a long time that I know they're not gonna, you know, be bad for the label or, you know, cause shenanigans, then, I feel like, it's a go.
So one of your best known releases on Distortion Productions is Electronic Saviors, which we've brought up here and there through this conversation. After releasing your seventh edition, what do you think it is about the compilation series that still resonates with people?
I have to always go back to the fact that the relatability is probably number one. I think it's people can relate to the material. Everyone has somebody that they either lost or, were close to, that they saw go through this. And I feel like you're less likely to find someone who hasn't. And I think, yeah, number one, it's the fact that people can relate to the material, and people want to do. Generally, people want to do good for others, uh, with the exception of someone in the White House. Whoops. um, I feel like the success and the longevity of it is attributed to such a community of love and passion for what they do. I never intended on doing number seven, and the reason there is a number seven is because three amazing things, like after six, dude. After number six, I was so burnt out. Um, I was just like, that's it. We had hit the $100,000 goal, which was always the goal from the beginning. I was like, okay, if we could donate this much, I feel like I've said my piece. But by the time six came out, I was really frustrated. Like, I really wanted bigger things for this series. It was near impossible to get any kind of press coverage. Still is. We're working on it, and the folks at Young Adult Survivors are pitching this to the news. So we're hoping to get some news coverage for seven, around the release party. Um, they're working on it. I don't know if it's going to get picked up. I don't know why. I don't think anything quite like this has ever been done. If it has, it was on a much smaller scale than this. We've had over 500 bands involved at this point, worldwide, 7 volumes, 117K donated, probably going to reach 130
Wow.
or more. after, come Christmas time, which is when we're going to make our donations for this one. Who knows? It could be more next year. Like the year after is usually when the big donation happens. Like, because there's residuals like that with digital and stuff like that
Right.
that we see like, after the fact. But man, like when 6 came out, the pandemic happened, and we didn't get to do a single show. We didn't get to do a single release party. We didn't get to celebrate it. I didn't get to close the door on it the way I wanted to. Even within our own scene, man, like it was tough getting press on it. And it just, I felt like, I'm like, does anyone even care about this anymore? I was more in the place of, man, I should really stop doing these until before someone tells me to stop doing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was doing the spin-offs like Respect the Prime and Draven's mixtape and the Be One of Us Lost Boys thing, like to keep the brand name alive. I will always do ones like that. But the box sets I really wanted to put to bed because I couldn't, Electronic Saviors comps never showed up on the top favorite releases of the year by people or DJs at the end of the year. I'm like, man, if a disc of all, if a box set of all exclusive material for Cancer can't even scratch the surface on people's like top releases of the year, no one ever reviews them. And I don't know if it's just because it's a large amount of tracks that no one wants to, or that it's too big of a job to take on for reviewing. But I mean, I never see reviews of the Electronics Saviors box sets, and that kind of bothers me. That I feel like, in that sense, we're not reaching enough people. But then I see that the donation number, and I was like, how can that be? There's a huge disconnect there.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're donating thousands of dollars, and I don't know any other compilation series that has done that. And you could probably hear the frustration in my voice when I talk about this. But after the pandemic, like we had just some great opportunities that got canceled and never rescheduled when after 6 came out, and I was ready to be done. And then 2023, we're out in Seattle at Mechanismus. Red Lokust played. And we did a panel, and the inevitable, why was there never a volume 7? And I said, I'll tell you why. And I explained to them a number of the things that I just explained to you. And I said, to get me to do volume 7 would depend on 3 factors. One, Metropolis Records would have to come back and agree to partner up with me like they always have in the past. This was after Dave had passed away, so I wasn't sure if that was could be a thing still. I miss Dave, terribly, but whenever I see his wife, his daughter, and his son, like, they always bring those emotions back to the forefront. Like, I'll see them, and it means so much to me that they were involved. But I said that to the crowd, and Nina Heckman was in the crowd. And I said, if Metropolis is going to be on board, then, it would be considered. She shouted out, we're on board.
Oh, wow.
So, and Christian Pop was out there too. So he was like, we're on board too. And I'm like, okay, that's one out of the way. The second one, probably a bit harder than that first one, is to get Jeff Confer and Samantha Johnson to come back and do the artwork. And they've done all 6 volumes, and Jeff did the Draven's mixtape artwork too. Now, Jeff currently lives down south now, and Sam lives out in Michigan somewhere. And I still stay in touch with Jeff. Okay, Aaron, I got you. But I stayed in touch with Jeff. He's still one of my besties. But I had lost touch with Sam, and when I came home from Mac that year, I called them both. Um, and they both agreed to come back. Like, they were both very happy to do it. They're both just extremely talented people. Jeff was one of the people that, I mean, saw me in some of my darkest moments when I was going through chemo. Like, he carried me down the steps into the ambulance uh, when I couldn't walk, and so he's extreme, like, very close to my heart, and Sam too. Like, and I couldn't bring myself to do another volume unless they did the art,
Yeah.
because that sells it. They are the face. Those two people are the face of this comp, and they always have been. They created the characters, and I said to Jeff and Sam, I said, whenever you guys do this volume, you have to create another male cyborg and a female cyborg, and you got to have the main one from all the rest of them in between. And I gave them a comic book of the position that I kind of wanted them in, and it was a comic called Warlock Chronicles. Adam Warlock is my favorite comic book character, and it was a comic that had Adam Warlock on one side and Thanos on the other, and in between them was Mephisto, and he has armor on them both. And I'm like, that comic cover is iconic to me because it's three of my favorite characters. And I said, I want this, but I want it with cyborgs, and that's how the cover of Seven happened. And those cyborgs are meant to be Christian from Cop, myself, Nina Heckman. So we recreated that at the panel at Mechanismus. So people could take their photos. I put my hood up, but yeah, the third stipulation that I told the crowd was each track on the comp, to get me to do Seven, each track had to be brand new. No more remixes, no more B-sides, no more, what I consider table scraps. Like, hey, we left this song off the album. Here, you can have it on your comp. And like Dave from Gen Cab still gives me shit about that, because he's like, yeah, Dave from Gen Cab, he was like, I didn't know that. Like, you didn't tell me that. I was like, you didn't tell me that. It was right there in the directions, but I lost the submissions. I was like, if you didn't know that, it's because you didn't read the direction. And that we had fun with that at the panel at Dark Force. Like, there was they were ribbing me a lot on that, and him and James from Panic Lift. But really great guys. I didn't think that would ever be able to be accomplished. And it's something like, okay, I'm going to start to put this thing together, but what are the likelihoods that I'm going to get 4 discs or 6 discs in the case of the premium edition of all new tracks by these bands? They started to come in. I got a new 16-volt track. I'm like, wow, this track's amazing. Black Heart Burning sends me this really heartfelt, just incredible slow song that's just takes me right back to being on that table getting hit with radiation. That new Acumen Nation song. I mean, but I wouldn't be sure until January 1st, which was the due date, came around, and I was still about 23 tracks short of what I needed. But I checked in with everybody, and I did have a couple bands drop out in the 11th hour, which sucked because those tracks would have been amazing. I'm sure of it. But everyone, check back in. I just need, you'll have it tomorrow, or I just need a couple more days. It's in the mixing phase, artists are meticulous, they have to, fine tune every last, thing. I mean, I'm one myself, and I know exactly what they're going through, so, it ended up coming together, and I'm extremely proud of it. I can't, it's hard to articulate the disbelief that whenever I see a copy of it, that I can't believe it exists now.
So regarding this seventh edition specifically, you'd mentioned the submissions and getting tracks in. Were there any tracks that you got in that were a shock to you that you weren't expecting to come in, or anything that you got from an artist where you listened to it and you thought this is completely out of left field for this artist?
Yes. Uh, Two kind of stand out. On the day that I lost two of the bands that I had mentioned at the 11th hour, two more stepped in that I was not expecting. And the two that stepped in, one of them was Dracos from FGFC 820, his solo track,
Yeah.
and it's a banger. Like, I'm like, holy shit, this is awesome. Like, I love his track so much, and I had never heard any of his solo material ever. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, the guy has he has a very diverse musical palette.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I know he likes a lot of metal. So I was expecting, something like that. And the track I mean, Wade Allen, who mastered it, he was like, that track's dope as hell. I was like, yeah, right. And the other one, Seb Komar, sent me a track that he wrote um, about a loved one that he lost. And I was not expecting, him either. But probably what I consider the heart and soul of the thing is the Black Heart Burning track, and that's just because of how heartfelt it is, how emotional it is. Uh, I've got a copy here, so I'm gonna go through Negative Formats track. The first thing that they put out in many years. I got that right before Christmas. And I remember my girlfriend and I were out Christmas shopping, and it just showed up in my inbox on my phone. And I'm like, "Hun, we got to listen to this right now." So I'm like, "Stop the car. Let's park for a second before we go into the store." I was like, "We got to listen to this." And I was just like, "God damn, I love this. This is great." And the Out track I thought was extremely catchy. Having Chris Connolly on here on a Trade Secrets song, uh, very unusual. Very, for him, I always considered him to be very prolific. Like, that guy can do anything. Like, he's capable vocally. Songwriting. He's another one that I think is just brilliant. I mean, the guys in Night wrote that, really great soft synth pop track. We have a song on here from Hexadine, who hasn't released anything in like 25 years. Mark from Cubanate, has their track. I mean, it's just on and on. I could talk about each one of these. We got Stabbing Westward Chris on the Metamorph track. He did a really nice testimonial on the inside in the liner notes too. He's a throat cancer survivor.
Oh wow.
You Blue Eyed Christ with Jane Jensen, and we had just signed Jane over the spring. We signed Jane and put out her new single, and I'm gonna get to meet her for the first time at the Savior's release party in Chicago. She's playing with us, and I've never met her before, so I'm thrilled to meet her. She was Juliet in Romeo and Juliet.
Oh really?
Yeah, so I'll get to meet her. And like, I've loved her since she did that Oxygen 23 project with Jim Marcus back in the 90s on the Fifth Column label. But I mean, man, I look at this track listing, and the bands I got to collab with on here, like Deathline International and Dissector, such amazing people on here that I'm blown away looking at this track. I can't look at it anymore. I'll get emotional, but yeah, I just those particular artists that I mentioned, I mean, all just banger after banger of this thing. Just extremely, set a very high bar, and now I got to do an 8. I got to do an 8, don't I?
I was gonna ask. That was gonna be one of the questions I was gonna get to. Was, do you think there's gonna be an 8? You said there wouldn't be a 7. Has this like recharged you?
I do. I do think there will be an 8 and a 9. I tell people an 8 and a 9 for sure. 9 is the Japanese number for completion. That's why there were 9 Seinfeld episodes, or Seinfeld seasons, rather. Um, and I feel like 9 is a great stopping point, but who knows? I might not even want to stop at 9. If the response can be like this every time, you know, it would be really great if we can get more press on this, and if more people outside of our scene would take notice of what's happening here, because I feel like without more people knowing about this, something really beautiful is being lost. And I kind of, it's not a personal wish for fame or anything like that. It's more of a, how can a project like this not be more known about? You know, even, and it has to be one thing. It has to be the kind of music that it is.
Yeah.
It has to be. And that's because nobody knows what it is. Nobody can really even define it that well. You know, how many, you know, you're old enough to remember the rec music industrial message boards from the 90s, you know, when people were like, what does KMFDM mean? What is even industrial? And you know, we the industrial scene fights amongst themselves like so much that I kind of feel like it holds itself back sometimes from getting out to people that you know might appreciate, especially young people who are into electronic stuff now. There's a lot of bands that I think are on this thing that could turn heads, and so many. And I said to Jason Novak up in Seattle, I was like, look, man, and I'm going to be real with you right now. If you don't want to write anymore, I get that. If you don't want to write music, completely understand. But know that from my perspective, you're capable. I know what you're capable of, and you've you've completely touched the hearts of so many people that I know with your music. And I feel like that if you don't at least try, that something really wonderful is being wasted. I hate to use that word wasted because it makes it sound like it's just a throwaway, but I feel like it deserves to be heard by more than just us, you know? And I will never ever stop thinking this music deserves more than what it gets. And these bands deserve to make a living off of this stuff. You know, I'll never know what it's like. I've been a poor fuck all my life. You know, I'll never know what it's like to not have to have a 9 to 5 job. You know, I would love to do the label for a living, but it's just not. I can't live on it.
Yeah.
It's impossible. You know, there's not enough people that are listening to this stuff now, um, and you know, I would love for Electronic Saviors to like lead a charge of you know maybe getting this stuff out there a little bit better to people who might like it. You never know. I mean, some people will be like, "What the fuck is this?" But I mean, go back to when you first heard that album that mattered to you the most. You know, it doesn't seem like people have that nowadays. Like, do people have that album that like really grabbed them and shook them and was like, "This is for you. This is for you." You know, why can't we have that? You know, outside of us. You know, because you know I go to these festivals and I meet all these wonderful people. Man, they come to the table and they tell their own stories, whether they're you know they're survivors themselves or you know the music that they're working on, or oh I saw you in this city and you know you said this and I'm like, oh did I? And I was like, I must have been, you know, had a few drinks. And no, it's and they're always like, you know, what you said really motivated me to do this and this and this, and I'm like, wow, you know, that's quite something when you hear that from people. And those things are really what keeps this thing moving.
Right.
The pandemic, I'm sure, killed a lot of momentum for a lot of musicians out there. Our our second Red Lokust album came out, boom, right as lockdown happened.
Oh.
I remember our sideline review that came out, and it was like, wow, it must really suck to be this band right now, because none of this stuff can be played in clubs like it's meant to. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my god, I wanted to. Oh, it was so angering. I mean, Lee and his wife Dana. I mean, Dana's going through it right now with cancer. Lee
Oh
spoke
wow.
about that at the panel. He was very open about it, and uh, so during that time period, I mean, she was not only dealing with health issues. The pandemic happens. We've just released an album that goes nowhere other than online sales, and we don't get to play any of those songs until 2 years later at what was called Dark Side of the Con, became Dark Force Fest. Um, we were the first band on the Friday, so we were the first band to play any music at that. It was the first music to come out after the pandemic. And I remember being nervous as hell, being on the side of that stage with Ethan Morales was there with me. And he was like, I've never seen you like this before. You're glowing. And I was just like, I'm nervous. And we had Mike Johnson from Ego drumming for us that night for the first time ever. And by then, because the doors were pushed back by like 2 hours, people were ready to hear some music. And people were there for a show. So I had to go up there and give them my best. And that really woke me up, and it woke Lee up, and we were just like, okay, we're back in, let's go to work on the next one. And so, we ended up 2 years later releasing this one, and I think it's the best thing I ever did. So I just hope we can, maybe keep that going. um you know
Yeah. So let's talk about Red Locust a little bit. You had mentioned Dark Force Fest and Mechanismus, and you were just talking about kind of a new generation coming in and maybe appreciating this music. I can remember, even 10, 15 years ago, there were virtually no festivals in the US for this kind of music, and now there's, at least in North America, probably four going on right
yeah,
now between, Dark Force Fest, Mechanismus, Absolution, and then if you include Canada, there's Terminus.
Terminus, Cold Waves.
What have your experiences been like, both as like somebody vending for Distortion Productions and a performer? Have you seen a lot of a younger crowd coming to these festivals, or have you seen a lot of the older crowd getting re-energized by these big shows with a lot of people in them?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of older folks, people my age, people in their 30s, but I also see people bringing their kids. I'm seeing people bringing their kids to these things and bringing their kids to the table, and I'm just like, wow. It's awesome when like someone brings up their son or daughter. Oh, this is my daughter. I'll be like, your parents kick ass, and they're I've known them for years, and or you got a really cool mom. I just love saying that to the young ones. Um, be like a thingamajig, Hulk in Avengers Endgame, where he's like, listen to your mom, she knows better. Just like, being that guy, because I'll never have kids of my own, and so I sort of, my girlfriend has a 12, soon to be 13-year old,
Oh wow.
and so he's kind of getting to that age where he's seen me play a couple times, but I don't think it's really registered with him yet. Music's not really been like an important. I don't think an important force in his life yet. I don't think he's quite there. But I would love, to see more young people latch on to this. I think the goth aesthetic is there's been kind of a resurgence.
Yeah.
Like some younger people that are like college age are getting into old bands like Puppy and Susie and stuff like that, and which is weird to me. I'm like, they're getting into those bands, but that's kind of where it ends. I'm like, there's a whole wealth of bands came after that. I was like, check out Leather Strip, check out, Mentalo and the Fixer, check out X Marks the Pedwalk, Apoptygma Berserk, B&B Nation, you know, they're and and on, but if you're only just sticking with The Cure and Nine Inch Nails, what I consider the surface level acts, that you keep digging deeper, and there's just so many more hidden gems in there, that I would love to see. There have been some young people that are in that stuff that have come to my shows, that have been like, wow, the bands you have on your label are so cool. They're so nice. They'll be at the merch table and they'll just talk to you for, until the place clears out after the show. And maybe people aren't used to people in bands being like that, or musicians being like that. But I think that having sort of a personal thing and having that connection is really important. And maybe, young people, they're searching for their identity. They want to find out who they are, and they're looking for that, and maybe that can help them in some way, or have that kind of positive influence. It's all about, positivity and sort of letting that radiate out, so.
Well, I think we're about coming up on time, so I have one more question I wanted to ask you. I know you've been putting on shows in Pittsburgh for a long time. If there was one band you could bring to Pittsburgh, regardless of logistics or the cost, who'd that band be?
Can you give me a top five?
I'll give you a top five, yeah.
All right, a top five. Okay. I sad to say they're all European, and they don't ever tour over here.
Yeah.
So, okay, I will start with my number one bucket list band, and I guarantee you probably this band isn't on anyone else's list. And it's only because from what I can tell, they've only done one U.S. tour, and it was in 1999 with Das Eek, in Strict Confidence.
Okay.
That's a band I've always wanted to see. I love them. Dennis is a cool person. I've talked to him online. Never got to see them. They're always playing those European festivals. Came close to seeing them over here. They were supposed to play Terminus in 2014. The one Terminus that I went to. And we vended Electronic Saviors 3 there. And when I got there, I found out that Instra Confidence had canceled.
Oh, no.
It was crushing. I was like, are you serious? I mean, there were a lot of other bands on the bill that I wanted to see, but I was like, I'm finally going to see them. They haven't played North America in so damn long, but they're my number one. Number two, Ashbury Heights.
Okay.
Not only because they are dear friends. I really love them both. Yaz and Anders. I think they're wonderful people. And they played Terminus last year. I didn't go. Mainly because Terminus is incredibly expensive. That's an expensive trip.
Yeah.
When we went in 2014, it was expensive, and that was in 2014 money. So, yeah, Ashbury Heights, number two for sure. Number three, L'Âme Immortelle, I think, takes the number three spot, and that's because that's a band I've loved since college, and I understand they're very theatrical live. Number four. Now this has to be bands that are still active, correct?
Yeah, let's keep them active, because then it's like a realistic, could actually happen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Number four is Solitary Experiments.
Oh, nice.
I saw them at Kinetic 2011. They were my favorite band there that year. I thought they were incredible. And I met them personally, super nice guys. I'm like, man, why doesn't this band play North America? Number five, Mind in a Box. Another band that I saw at Kinetic 2011. Never plays I think they did play a couple shows that Interface played with them a long time ago, probably more than 10 years ago, like when their second album was out or something. Like came over here and they played like a limited amount of shows. But those are my top five, and I know they're all European bands, but they're bands that I feel like I'm never gonna see, you know. And
Yeah.
even though I saw two of them, I would love to bring those guys to Pittsburgh, all of them. And money isn't an object.
No.
Like I'll pay whatever to see them play a Pittsburgh show. You know?
Nice.
You know, I'll take a loss for those five bands. What about you? Who do you want to see coming here?
Ooh. Well,
Yeah, I mean, there are still bands out there that I would love to see, you know, but
well,
I gotta
you're doing this Mentalo show in Pittsburgh, aren't you?
yeah, Mentallo is happening October 4th, and what's weird is they're going out with Pygmy Children. I'm like, Pygmy Children, that's a name. I feel like Obi-Wan. I was like, that's a name I've not heard in a long time, and I'm like, they were one of the first Out of Line Records bands, and they were on Cleopatra in the '90s. I think they only had those two records.
Yeah.
Wow, to see them would be cool. So that, I mean, that's going to be a cool show. We're on that show, and Lost Signal is on that show. So that's going to be, you know, Lost Signal hasn't played Pittsburgh since 2001. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be a cool show.
And that's going to be at Side Quest, right? In Lawrenceville?
Yeah, all these. Can I go over the list of gigs? That
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this may come out after some of the gigs because it's going to come out in July, but July 1st. But
okay. Oh no, we're good then.
Okay.
July 23rd, Electronic Savior 7 pre-party or release party. That's Interface, Go Fights headlining, Red Lokust is playing, and Saphira V. That's the first of our 4 tour dates that we're gonna do. We're gonna do Detroit the next night, and then Chicago, and then Madison. Like Jane Jensen's gonna join us. I think Lorelei Dreaming is gonna join us at some point. Like some bands are gonna jump on and jump off. But then in August 12th, we're doing Curse Mackey and Sign. That's also that. All these are at SideQuest. And there's a third band, I can't remember the name of them, but the event page will go up for that one pretty like next weekend. And then September 18th is Stoneburner. And October 4th is Mentallo, and then October 30th is Inertia. So that's going to be super cool, and I'm going to try to put on some cool openers on that one because they're going to play with IMX the next night at Dracula's Ball in Philly. So
cool! So you're getting them right before the Drax Ball.
Yeah,
Nice.
and we just released that vinyl, so you know it's going to be cool to see Reza play again. Like I love Inertia so much. Like I think he's a great guy and great live band. But yeah, so that's basically the coming attractions for Distortion. And release wise, you already went over the Acumen Nation double vinyl. We just put out the Inertia one, which technically comes out in July. We have a new single by Sensuous Enemy remix. It's by Mary Catman. She did a really cool drum and bass remix of their song Weeping Woman. That comes out this Friday. And then next Friday is a Metamorph, the Harlot EP. Then summer is pretty much pretty wide open until the Acumen record. But I know there's a new Eva X coming. Solemn Shapes is still working on their full length. The Spider Lily's full length. There'll be a lot of other stuff. Death by Love is working on their full length. So yeah, there's a lot coming. Plus there'll be some new signing announcements, I'm sure.
Nice. Well, Jim, thank you for spending all this time with us. Thank you for all you do in Pittsburgh.
Thank you for having me and listening to me bullshit.
Of course. And I'll see you around here soon.
All right, thank you so much, man.